In this lecture, we will cover the ways in which we measure the amount of crime that is committed by juveniles. We will be focusing on the FBI's crime data, specifically NIBRS. And this is regarded as a source of official data. The term official crime data refers to data that is reported by official sources such as a police department or a sheriff's department. The FBI collects data on crimes known to law enforcement from law enforcement agencies throughout the U.S. Departments enter data into the NIBRS database. There's a little bit of inexactitude introduced here because the FBI NIBRS categories sometimes don't perfectly fit the definitions of crime that are used in state penal law code. And so the person responsible for data entry has to determine what category in NIBRS best fits a particular crime. Now, I have a link in the module for this week to the Crime Data Explorer. You should take a look, familiarize yourself with the Crime Data Explorer. You can look at data nationwide, or you can look at data specifically for Idaho. I will say the data that's available for Idaho is very good because Idaho has been reporting to NIBRS for some time. Not every law enforcement agency in every state reports. So some states, particularly New York State, has not begun having all of their jurisdictions report yet. And so this means the crime data from New York isn't quite right. We're not completely measuring the crime that's occurring in New York State. So that's a significant concern with NIBRS. More agencies are coming on board with NIBRS, but NIBRS coverage is not as good as the coverage used to be for the old SRS system. The textbook focuses largely on the SRS system because that was what was primarily being used at the time the textbook was written. Just as the textbook came out, the FBI began the switch to NIBRS. Now, you should look at page 50 and 51 of the textbook to find the complete list of NIBRS Group A and Group B offenses. So just a little bit about these offenses. More data is available on the Group A offenses, and that would include information about the incident, the date, the hour it happened, when it was cleared, the method of clearance, the offense. They document whether it was attempted or completed, if the offender had been using alcohol or substances, if there were computers involved, what location the offense occurred at, the premises that were entered, if there was any kind of gang involvement, that is entered into the database, whether there was a weapon used or force was used, if there was a bias motivation, so if this was a hate crime. There's also information about the victim's connection to the offender, the type of victim, so thinking about the age, sex, race, ethnicity, immigration status, the circumstances, in the case of an assault or homicide, any injuries that were incurred, and the relationship of the victim to the offender. Information is taken on people who are arrested for a particular offense, including their arrest date, the type of arrest, if they had weapons, their age, sex, race, gender, ethnicity, their resident or immigration status. And there's also information taken on the type of property that was lost or damaged. So that includes a description of the property, the value of the property, if it was recovered. So NIBRS has a lot of really, really great data. The one issue is, as I said before, not all departments are reporting yet. This is a graph of the rate of violent crime offenses per 100,000 people by year. This is something that's really important to see. Often we have this sort of assumption that crime rates are always going up, right? Which is natural, right? Because nobody wants to experience violent crime. It's a terrifying kind of phenomenon. Crime, particularly violent crime, is also used, right, by politicians frequently to make a case for why they should be elected, right? If you elect me, I will stamp out violent crime. And a lot of our news media covers violent crime because it's easy to cover, it gets lots of eyes. And we also have lots of really great television shows and movies that focus on crime. So it seems like violent crime is all around us all the time, and that we are all at risk, right, every day. The reality of the crime numbers is really important, and it's pointing in the opposite direction. So crime peaked in 1994 and has been declining. It declined until 2014. In 2014, it began to increase again, but our crime rates are nowhere near where they were in the early 1990s. So crime is still at historically low levels. We did see a bump in violent crime that began between 2019 and 2020. And we're still doing research on this, but the assumption is, right, or the best guess, because we're still collecting the data and doing the research, is that this bump was related primarily to the COVID pandemic, because violent crimes began to decrease in 2021 and 2022, and the early data from 2023 is showing another decrease in violent crime. Over the next 3 slides, we're going to look at some screen captures from the FBI's Crime Data Explorer. The Crime Data Explorer utilizes the NIBRS data, right? And we're looking at offending in 2022. In this slide, we're focused on the offender's age and the victim's age. When we look at offending by children, right, ages 0 to 9, that number is very low. Right? We have 2,110 individuals who fall in that age group who committed an offense. The number increases for adolescents, right, between the ages of 10 and 19. And unfortunately, the FBI collects their data this way. So we're including some people who would be understood as adult offenders into the adolescent category. 10 to 19-year-olds account for approximately 15.3% of offenders known to the police in 2022. When we look at victims, the number of people who are children aged 0 to 9 has increased. Approximately 4%, right, of crime victims known to police, right, were children in the 0 to 9 year age range. When we look at adolescents ages 10 to 19, approximately 16.4% of victims, right, fell in that adolescent age range. The NIBRS data also includes information on location types and the victim's relationship to the offender. This is a little bit spooky when we're looking at location type. The place where victimization is most likely to occur is in a home or other type of residence, and that's followed by the more expected, right, highway, alley, street, or sidewalk category. When we look at victim's relationship to offender, we have a large category where the relationship of the victim to the offender is not known, perhaps because the victim didn't feel comfortable saying, or because that data was not available. When we look at the relationship, however, people who know you are extremely dangerous. You're more likely to be victimized by an acquaintance, by a boyfriend or girlfriend, by another intimate partner, say for example somebody you are married to, than you are a stranger. Strangers still account for the second largest category, but when we add up the people who know you, you're more likely to be victimized by somebody you know. At least people were in 2022, and that is the general pattern. So NIBRS also gives us information on the type of weapons that were used in offending. Right? So this data is still from 2022. People were more likely to use personal weapons, their hands and feet. NIBRS lists teeth as a weapon, so people are out there biting each other. Firearms are an extremely important weapon category. NIBRS divides the firearm category up depending on the information that's available from the local department. They do have a handgun category. As you can see, handguns are actually the second largest weapon type used after personal weapons. Right? But the more general category of firearm, right, this is still sizable. So firearms are used frequently, right, in victimization. Knives and cutting instruments are less common, right, than firearms. Sometimes there's not enough information available about the weapon, or maybe just intimidation was used. Right? In that case, right, we see the category none. Right? There were no weapons used in that particular kind of offense. Right? But you would expect that when people are getting into conflicts, they're going to use what they have with them as a weapon, and right, most commonly that would be, right, hitting somebody with your hand or with a fist. Now, when we look at the official data for arrests of juveniles, juveniles accounted for a larger percentage of arrests in 2022 than they have since 2018. This is something to watch out for, and we need to try to get a handle on, what's happening here. We do not want juvenile violent offending to be increasing. And it also increased for the individual categories of homicide, aggravated assault, and simple assault. Right? So it's going to take us some time to look at this data and try to figure out exactly what is driving, right, the percentage of juveniles who are involved in offending. I would think that this is likely related to stresses, right, that people were exposed to during COVID. But as I said, we're going to need to do a lot more research to try to figure that out. In this slide, we are looking at juvenile arrests by offense type, and we are using the data from NIBRS for the years 2021 and 2022. Right? So we do have some concern that there's been an increasing number of people under the age of 17 who have been arrested, right, for violent offenses. And this is going to take some work, right, to try to parse that out, try to figure out what's driving this large, this increase. in the number of juvenile arrests for violent crime. When we look at property crime, the numbers are also up for property crime. There are a couple of categories here: carjacking and motor vehicle theft. Right? Carjacking is considered to be a violent offense. Motor vehicle theft is considered to be a property crime. The increase here may be driven by the increase in the number of, or in the popularity rather, of engaging in motor vehicle thefts. Right? For some reason, right, over the past 3 or so years, right, there's been an increased number of young people spreading information on social media about how to go about stealing cars. And this has actually driven an increase sort of in the popularity of auto theft, right, among juveniles. Right? So in the Moodle module for week 4, social learning theory, I actually have an article about the Kia boys, right, and the spread, right, of automobile theft among young people as a result of social media. Right? But here we do need to be very careful about jumping to the assumption that, oh my God, juvenile crime is increasing. It must be these bad kids today. Right? There could be a number of other factors that are at play here. The arrest practices could have changed. Right? Police could be more likely to look at younger people as suspects, for example, more willing to make arrests of juveniles. So some of this rise may be explained by an actual increase in offending among juveniles. Some of it may actually be due to new patterns of policing. Right. When we're looking at the official data sources, particularly the FBI, there are some limitations. Right? NIBRS is a compilation of crimes that are known to the police. So we have to worry about what we call the dark figure of crime. Right? The dark figure of crime is crime that goes unreported to the police. And why don't people report some crimes? Right? Some crimes are really quickly reported. Right? Somebody's car gets stolen. They need that car insurance money. They're going to be running down to the police department to file that report so that they can get their car insurance payment. Sexual assault, on the other hand, is the least reported offense, particularly sexual assaults experienced by juveniles. And there are a number of reasons for that. There's a great deal of shame, there's stigma, there's fear that help to drive down reporting rates. In addition, sometimes the FBI merges some kinds of crime. So for example, when we're looking at the burglary category, that might actually include acts that aren't technically burglary. Right? They might be trespass under the state penal law code, but because it's difficult to try to merge the NIBRS categories used by the FBI and the state penal law code, some of those trespasses are going to get counted as burglaries. The UCR definitions don't always match the penal law code definitions, so there's going to be some uncertainty there. In addition, participation in NIBRS is voluntary. Not all jurisdictions report. As I said before, Idaho is great at reporting. And you can actually look up the Idaho data at the website of the Idaho State Police. Right? Other jurisdictions don't report or have as many agencies reporting. So New York, for example, Florida, right? These are states with large populations. Right? And by not having all jurisdictions report, we're missing some of the crime that is occurring in those states. This has been an introduction to official crime data.